Religion has played a huge role in world history, and still does. Oftentimes, however, we don't explore the religious history of the African continent in the way we should. Religion in Africa has played a key role in how Africans interact with each other and the world around them. So today, I wanted to discuss 5 religious movements from the African continent that mobilized African people. What up, African world? It's Home Team here, and welcome back to another video of African history, culture, and worldview. By supporting this channel on Patreon, you're helping in the creation of these videos and supporting this content. If you like access to full courses and sources, or you simply want to show your support, you may do so by clicking the Patreon link in the description box below. Let's begin with the religious movements from ancient times. In Egypt, Pharaoh Akhenaten was seen as a sort of religious rebel and reigned from 1353 through 1336 BC. Akhenaten was an 18th dynasty king and philosopher who changed his name from Amenhotep, meaning Amen is satisfied, to Akhenaten, meaning he who praises Aten. Now, Akhenaten was not at all the first Kemetic theologian or philosopher, but he most certainly was the most significant, as he established such a stir in Egyptian society. Akhenaten, for whatever reason, was determined to start a movement, and we must give him credit for his creativity. He seemed to be very inspired, as if he had a vision of some sort. Some African scholars have questioned his ability to inspire other Africans to worship Aten, as his death was the end of Atenism, or the worship of Aten. But at least temporarily, he was the founder of a movement. Many people don't even know that his son, Tutankhamun, was actually born as Tutankhaten. Tutankhamun changed his name later, perhaps due to pressure from the priesthood, who vehemently despised Akhenaten's religious ambitions. During the 18th dynasty, the Nile Valley god Amun reigned supreme. No other god had dominated the ancient Nile Valley as Amun did. Thus, any god that challenged his popularity would be subjected to targeted theological and political assaults. Even though some scholars challenge the idea that Akhenaten popularized the concept of monotheism in ancient times, at the very least he sparked the idea for the world, as some adherents of potential monotheistic thought might have influenced others outside of Africa. We can't know for sure, but the rise of Aten and his most fervent servant Akhenaten made a very big impact on the religious history of Africa. Our next ancient religious movement began during the Kushite dynasty of Egypt around 744 BC. Not many people are aware that the land south of Egypt tremendously influenced the culture and the religion further north. In fact, the foundational precepts of Egyptian civilization and society originated further south. Some even make the argument that the Egyptians merely packaged this culture nicely and presented it to the rest of the world. The rulers of Kush knew this perspective well, and as they saw what they believed to be a corruption of Nile Valley culture and religion, they began to mobilize themselves. King Pi of Kush was the first Kushite ruler to successfully invade Egypt and restore the culture. He proclaimed an open holy war against Egypt, and this was a true holy war for him. He took this task very seriously. Records tell us that he told his army to fight nobly and announced to their enemy that attack was imminent. He even told his army to put on their finest linen and cleanse themselves in the river before the invasion. This was unprecedented in Nile Valley history. No other rulers of Egypt or Nubia were as pious as the Kushite kings of the 25th dynasty. King Pi tells us that he was instructed by Amun himself to complete this task, and that he was the vessel for Nile Valley purification. It was a very interesting time in Kushite history. Some even refer to this period as the African Renaissance. Next, we have Kempavita of the Congo Empire. Kempavita was a young woman who started the most dynamic religious movement in all of Central African history. What she was able to accomplish as a young woman was very impressive, especially because the Congo countryside was so politically unstable. The Bakongo people were introduced to Christianity with the arrival of the Portuguese in the 15th century, and many Bakongo nobles were baptized into the faith. Kempavita herself was baptized and was renamed Beatrice. Kempa was said to be a Congolese prophet and the founder of a Christian movement that became known as Antonianism. Her movement became very hostile toward the European missionaries in Congo. She was born around 1684 in a small provincial town near Mount Kabangu at the banks of the Mbedizi River in the eastern end of the Kingdom of Congo, today part of Angola. As all Congolese who had been Catholics for nearly 2 centuries, she was baptized as soon as a priest passed her town. Kempe's family were members of the highest group of Congolese nobility, but at the time, the Kingdom of Congo was experiencing civil war, and the capital, Mbanza Congo, was abandoned. In August 1704, Kempavita fell ill with a mysterious sickness. She later reported that she died, and that she was reborn as Saint Anthony. While in this state, she said that God wanted her to restore the Congo capital and unite Congo under one king. Kempe's movement was more concerned with the moral principles of her faith and not the European traditionalisms that plagued it. She convinced the Bakongo people that one day they will have a saint of their own, an African one. Kempe claimed that in her trips to heaven, God revealed to her the real history of Christianity. According to her visions, Jesus had been born in Mbanza Congo, the spiritual capital of all the Bakongo people. His baptism in Nazareth was only a fake name for his real place of baptism, which was located in the northern Congolese province of Nsundi. She also professed that his mother Mary was a Bakongo woman. Her success came when she and her followers reoccupied the capital, at least temporarily. She became the beacon of hope. The Antonian movement was becoming involved in the politics of the kingdom, and the political authorities were no longer able to control the forces that had been unleashed by her preaching. And so, in 1704, Kempe was captured and tried by Congolese law, in which she was condemned as a heretic and was ordered to be killed. Although Kempavita was killed, her movement outlived her. In fact, many of her followers believed she was still alive. Some scholars claim that some of her followers were enslaved and brought to America, where they carried out a revolt known as the Stonewall Rebellion in South Carolina. If this is true, her legacy is certainly far-reaching. Next, we have the Kingdom of Inari. The Kingdom of Inari was a little-known socio-religious polity in southeastern Nigeria among the Igbo people. Inari was very influential religiously as they began to preach messages of healing and peace. In many ways, it can be seen as the equivalent of Buddhism in Africa. Inari is said to have taken form around the 11th century, but its religious precepts are perhaps much older. The socio-religious influence of Inari at the height of its power developed into what historians have acknowledged as a sort of holy land and compared it to the religious cities of ancient Rome and Mecca. Inari rose to become the center of a dominant and imperial city-state whose influence was felt in most Igbo communities. Inari hosted people as pilgrims who sought forgiveness for their sins, as it was believed that one could be cleansed of sins and taboos by entering the holy city. The significance of Inari was not limited to being a sacred land. It was also regarded as a healing haven where people brought their abnormal children for ritual cleansing. Inari also hosted people from other communities, whose reason for visiting was to receive the knowledge of yam medicine, known as Ogwuji, in exchange for annual tributes. Inari was an African haven where people could restore their mind and soul. It even evolved into a place where slaves would be set free upon their arrival. But for me, the most impressive thing about the Kingdom of Inari, and the only reason it became a kingdom in the first place, was because it expanded only through religious converts and not any violence. Essentially, the Igbo priesthood were spiritual warriors who converted people to the belief system and traveled all across the region and gained the loyalty and support of various towns and villages. The mythological origins of Inari tell us that a sky being came down to Igbo land and formed a civilization, beginning the religious tradition. The Kingdom of Inari was ahead of its time, and it seems as though its spiritual liberation became a threat to other African states in the region, and it began to weaken. But its powerful spiritual movement certainly mobilized Africans to build a sort of utopia in the heart of West Africa. And last but not least, we have the Almoravid Movement. One cannot ignore or deny the impact of Islam on the African continent. Islam certainly mobilized millions of Africans over the centuries. One of the earliest and among the biggest Islamic movements in Western Africa was the Almoravid Movement. Sometime around 1020 AD, a Berber ruler of Adugas converted to Islam. Yahya, his successor, made a pilgrimage to Mecca and met the Islamic cleric Ibn Yasin. Yahya invited the cleric to return to Africa with him to evangelize among the Berbers. It didn't work. The Berbers exiled Ibn Yassin, who was forced to flee to Tekrur in Senegal. While there, Ibn Yassin founded his Islamic movement, the Almoravids. Berbers and Tekrur converts of Senegal flocked to his standard, fired up by Islam. The Berbers wanted the independence of Adugas from the non-Islamic rule of Ouagadougou. They also wanted to Islamicize by force, if necessary, the Berbers of the desert. On the other hand, the Senegalese wanted their independence from Ouagadougou. A match had been made, and by 1055, the Almoravids wrested Adugas from Ouagadougou's rule. And from that moment on, the Almoravids became unstoppable, spreading their empire from Senegal all the way to southern Spain. Well, I'm all out, guys. If you like these videos and want to help in its continued production, consider supporting the home team on patreon.com. The link is in the description box below. Know thyself, remember your ancestors. Peace.